Hi there. Welcome to Creation Station Monthly. I'm Bob from Creation Station. This is our monthly show where we take a bit more time. We look at a creative topic and we talk with two creative people to find out what makes them tick and how they look at being creative in that. Yeah, that whole creative thing we keep talking about here. As always, Creation Station at broward.org comes to me if you have any ideas for the show. I would like to introduce our guest today. We've got Jeff Cuscutis. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good.
And we have Sean Kelly with us. How are you doing today, Sean?
I am doing fantastic.
Thank you both very much for being here with us today. We had everything all sorted through our little minor technical glitches. So, as we always do, nobody who's here typically knows the other people on the panel. So I want to get us started. And Jeff, you tell us about how you got started with role playing, because our theme today is going to be all about role playing and interacting and doing those kinds of things. Tell us about that.
I got started in the early 80s, probably about 84, 85, something like that. Uh, I did not actually start with Dungeons and Dragons. I ended up uh, being in a game store, and they had a game that was in the back of the store, and it was Avalon Hill actually put out a role-playing game for a while called Lords of Creation. That was my very first role-playing game. So it was conceptually way ahead of its time. Rule-wise, there's a reason it's not around anymore. But yeah, that got me hooked. And then when I got into high school, I played a bit more. And then when I got to college, I played probably too much. And then I haven't stopped since.
How about you, Sean? Tell us, when did you get started with this?
Similar story for me. I actually started in December of 1980. It was with the old original boxed Dungeons and Dragons set, and then I got the new one right after my birthday in January of 1981, which was the mold vase set. And of course, that immediately just kind of lit my world on fire. And I was sort of a quiet, uh, kid that now suddenly had this brand new world of thinking ahead of me, and it really did change a lot.
It was I remember I was homesick and my mom was out at the store and picked up this small black box with 3 books in it about space. And she was like, I think he likes space stuff. So, and she brought home, and it turns out that that was the original 3 books for Traveler. And so I started off on the very basics of that before I even got to D&D and everything like that.
Yeah, mine's like right over there.
Oh, excellent.
I have
Excellent.
the I
Excellent.
have the 3 book Traveler too.
Yeah. So tell us, first off, Sean, you've actually taken this farther than Jeff or I've ever done, because you actually turned this kind of into a career. So
Yeah, for a little while.
tell us about that idea of what's the difference in your mind between a career and a hobby? Because most people are looking at this, used to think, oh, role playing, this is just a game you play, this is a hobby. And then over the last 6 years or more, this has really, exploded onto the public scene. And you were had a small portion of that where things were going. So tell us about that. What's the difference in your mind between the two?
Well, wow, that's a good question. I think for me, a lot of it just it was like role playing sort of became integrated into what I was doing, because I learned role playing games shaped me and who I am from the very beginning. I think with everything from being able to speak to people to being able to lead small group conversations, to be able to organize, to put together. With my background as a teacher and as a communicator and as a as a management consultant and keynote speaker, all these things, they all go back to that fateful day in December of 1980 when I first picked up a role playing game book. And it's you know it's hard to believe how different things could have been if I hadn't. You know, I may have just remained this shy little ADD kid, but that it didn't. Yeah, some of the ways that I've done it professionally, we've used it for team building, um, both corporate and also for like things like families and stuff. We've run Dungeons and Dragons games and other games. At one point, I was working with another guy who works in leadership and management consulting. We were actually in the process of putting together uh, groups for kids that would be basically sort of like an after school type thing. And we were even thinking of using some sort of like badges and things, almost like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. And life just got busy, and we never ended up following that through. But we put a whole lot of work into it, that's for sure. And somewhere I still have several file folders full of notes and ideas and domains and things that we purchased, and maybe I'll pick that up again. Um, and then, of course, certainly, then I ended up designing and running escape rooms. So that certainly became a something that fed back from that experience too.
How about you, Jeff? Where do you draw the line between hobby and professional?
Well, I think if you're getting paid for it, I mean, I've never been paid for any of that, which would be nice, and but I mean, if you actually are running games or if you're writing material for it and doing that, then certainly I think that if you're getting paid for it, I think even if you start putting it up for free in places like DM's Guild or stuff like that, that you can make materials and put them up online, and then even if you have it for free, I think at that point you can say you're a professional because you're writing, you're doing creative stuff and putting it up there for that.
I think, yeah, I wonder, do you think it counts for, because most people nowadays who have been introduced to role playing seem to, it's either the high school thing, like the three of us all seem to have gotten into it that way, or you heard about it through, a Netflix show or through online, watching other people play and watching, it kind of grew out of the whole esports idea, which I think is a perfectly legitimate thing. I mean, people
Mhm.
watch baseball instead of playing baseball, so why not watch
Exactly.
somebody play
Yeah.
whatever video game instead of Critical Role? If is one of the ones that everybody should, I think, knows about. They are really exploded in popularity. They're making some crazy, six-digit numbers in salary for that show thing now. Um, where do you think that? And here's where especially for you, Jeff, because you're doing this as a hobby, as a fun thing.
Mhm.
Where do things like that, like those big shows, those big expensive things, how do you think that impacts how people are viewing what you're doing? Like when you're
Uh,
talking to friends about, well, yeah, I'm running this game. What are their expectations of you now?
well, there used to be much more of the what do you do as a hobby the thing, and then once 5e and Critical Role together, I think really did hit a critical mass for general knowledge of like everybody now, pretty much knows, oh, D&D, that kind of, that. And you know, I watch Critical Role, but not pretty much. I think I've gotten a couple of people in my group to actually watch some of that, and now they're watching it, but none of them were watching it before. But like talking with people at work, they're much more aware of it now. They go, "Oh, it's like Critical Role," and actually, I was talking with the coworker. Said, "Oh, my daughter watches that, so she knows." It's gotten much more into the zeitgeist than it ever had been before, where we're just some weird little hobby, and now we're mainstream pretty much. That's
Yeah, yeah,
Kind of lucked out. Yeah, go, Sean.
yeah. It's amazing. I remember going, back in the days when I was a consultant and I wore a suit most of the time. I had a little D20 keychain that I had hanging on my briefcase, and I remember going to business expos and having people like bank executives and stuff like that looking at me going, "Oh my gosh, do you play Dungeons and Dragons? I used to play that when I was a teenager. Wouldn't it be great?" And it's like, "Yeah, yeah, I do." And at that time, it seemed, really, they almost kind of came up to you, to confess, some weird, shameful thing, but uh, nowadays it's like, oh yeah, I really want to do that sometime. I moved into a new house, and people find out before too long that you're running a D&D game, and it's like, oh yeah, I'd like to try that sometime. Oh yeah, I'd like to try that
Mhm.
sometime. I'd like to do that. I've had 70, 80-year olds say to me that they want to play Dungeons and Dragons with me sometime, uh, and it's amazing. It's the, the popularity. I mean, I was those kids on Stranger Things. That was me. That was my generation. I maybe was a little bit older than that, but and we played a little differently than they picture them on the TV show. But yeah, now here we are, and it's like it's a cool thing. It's out in the open. It's neat. I like it.
How about we've mentioned the words Dungeons and Dragons like several times so far. What are some of the other games? What are some of the other role or even non-games but role-playing things that you guys have done?
Oh, wow. Yeah, you go ahead and answer that, Jeff. I'll try to run it through my mind.
Well, let's see. Like other games I've played, superhero games like Champions and Mutants and Masterminds, where you're playing superheroes instead of like dungeon adventurers. Uh, there's the pulp one called Adventure under the White Wolf system, which is your like 1920s gangsters or pulp heroes and doing stuff. Traveler, which we mentioned earlier, is sci-fi stuff. There's a Star Trek role-playing game. There's a Star Wars role-playing game. Actually, there's multiples of each of those. You
Yeah.
know, any kind of idea you can have, somebody's made a role-playing game of it.
Yep.
However obscure that is, it's out there somewhere, and somebody plays it and
There was even one for the
enjoys it.
show Dallas there for a little while, I
Oh yeah, yeah.
think.
I was at a convention and I ran the system that uses the stuffed animals, the bunnies and stuff like that. That I did. I had to learn that one on the fly as I was doing that I was in the kids' room helping take care of people at a convention and doing that kind of thing. So yeah, no, you guys are both right. There's a million different systems and ways it's and that leads me to the question is what do you think role playing is that's different than follow this set of rules to do these things? Because Monopoly has that same thing. Nobody thinks of Monopoly as a game, as a role playing game.
I think it's putting yourself in the game. When you play Monopoly, you never go, I'm the shoe. You're moving your piece around the board. I mean, you can play D&D that's sort of like that of I move my guy in here and do that, but you'll still going to have moments when you go, I'm that guy busting in the door and oh, there's monsters here. Ah, fight it and I find treasure and oh, I'm dead and now I make a new character and move on. And I think it's the putting yourself in the game as opposed to playing it from overhead.
Yeah, and I think there's an openness to role playing um, where the kind of the sky's the limit as to how you work out the story. And people often start with what is a role playing game, and I like to say, you remember when you were a kid and you played cops and robbers, and you'd point your finger at the next person, or your piece of stick that you found on the street, and you point it at the next person, and you go bang bang, I shot you. And the other kid says what? They say no, you didn't. Well, role playing games simply, the rules for role playing games simply give you some sort of percentages or something that you can roll to see if yes, in fact, you did, or no, in fact, you did not hit that person. And it's sort of taking that pretend, create your own story together type thing, and gives it sort of a framework, some serendipity, some chance to it that kind of emulates life in a very shallow way, so that you have the experience of doing some things that maybe you didn't do before. Um, yeah, it's You can do it
Yeah,
with
and
anything, and any game that, and any movie that you might have watched. We can pretend that we're in that one. You know, we can take on the aliens, or take on the ice cream shop.
yeah, I think one of the big differences is like computer role-playing games. The problem is that you're always constrained by what the programmer thought the game, what you could do. In tabletop stuff, you can come up with any crazy idea. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but you can think out. It's all about thinking outside the box and being able to go and say, here's a crazy idea. Why don't we convince them to join us rather than fight us? Or you can get into a lot broader options to get into to try to solve the problem. Because whatever you're trying to do, it's trying to solve a problem, get an objective, get a reward, keep repeating and keep playing. And that's, being able to step around and do stuff that's anything you can think of could work.
Yeah, it's very much a collaboration and cooperation, problem solving uh, idea, and it all depends. If there's a game master that is running your particular role playing game, what are the different types of scenarios that they put in front of you and any other players, if there are some, and together kind of working that thing out, and maybe even having a character that you're playing through that you're trying to imagine that's different than you. Maybe it's someone that's a lot more smarter than you are in person, or a lot better looking, or whatever, and you're able to kind of experience thinking through that. It's the same as if, for those who've ever done any acting or drama, it's the same sort of concepts. Just, you may not actually be physically acting it out. Sometimes people
Yeah,
like to
if
do
you're
that.
good at improv, you'll be good at role playing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much a lot of improvisation. In fact, that's one of the chief skills that I often list as the types of things you can take away from tabletop role playing when I'm talking to parents about, their kids doing it. Improv is a lot more than just playing, in theater and drama. Improv is life. I mean, we're all day long we're having to make quick decisions about, you know, am I going to turn left here or right here, or whatever. It's another one of those
You
fantastic.
bring up the idea of kids.
Yeah.
So both of you guys have kids. Or tell me, or do they play with you? Do they play? I mean, let's be clear. All kids do role playing, no matter what.
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
But are they doing it in a more formal structure with you, or are even if it's not by rules based? Is it? Do you guys have, or have you had that with the family, or what goes on with that? How does that for
Mm.
the parents out there who are like, wait a minute, I want my kid to be imaginative, but how do I get involved with this?
Well, I mean, I play with my son. He's 10. We don't use any formal rules for stuff. It's mostly just the kids playing in collaborative storytelling with like action figures and stuff. Uh, I do plan to get him into this more as he gets older, but I want it to be more him wanting to get into it than me like pushing on him to get into it. Come play with my hobby. What does he want to do more than what I want to do is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think my boys were 9 and 13 maybe when I introduced them to the hobby, and of course now they're 21 and 26. So, but interesting enough, my 21-year-old is now a union commercial electrician, and he gathers with his other construction guys every other week, and they all play D&D together. So that's kind of cool. My other son's in the Navy and serving, actually getting ready to be deployed, and he still has elements of the hobby that he still enjoys.
No, when I was in the Marine Corps, we played.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
He'll have a game.
Yeah, you got to do something, when you're out doing
There's a
that. When you're
lot of
when
hours.
you're hurrying up to wait, you got to do
Yep.
something.
I've got
But
a
yeah,
little notebook that I have from back in the early 80s when I was on watch and I just had the script, got things bubbling in your mind. You got to scribble them down to do something. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, soon as my boys latched onto it, they absolutely loved it. And pretty soon I was meeting a lot of other dads who wanted to play with their kids that maybe they played when they were young and never played since then. And there was, for a while there, I was getting together regularly with my boys and other fathers and their kids, and we just had a blast. We have so many memories that we've created, and my boys and I still talk about and laugh about like they actually happened. I mean, those types of stories and
Because it's
memories.
real. It did happen. I mean,
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
the tradition of storytelling.
yeah. Remember that time that
Yeah.
you tried this and it worked, and somebody rolled this and we all cheered, or we all fell out of our chairs, or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah, we're actually going to do a show just on storytelling end of summer.
yeah.
Tell me about the idea of that, as we were both just, all three of us were saying that the structure of it, how does that, how do you interact with that structure? And what would you suggest for someone who is trying to figure out what is a good structure for themselves? Because, and Sean, you mentioned earlier, you're applying that same structure to other things outside of strict role-playing games. So where do you think those things lead people to, or what would be a good source for people to look at?
Uh, well, assuming by structure you mean like I guess like game mechanics
Yeah,
type
yeah, game
things.
mechanic type stuff or things like that. Yeah. To kind of like codify how are we playing? Not
Yeah,
what we're
yeah. How
playing,
do
but
we
how we're
determine when
playing.
you point your finger at the
Yeah.
guy whether or not you shot him or not? Um, there are literally, I don't know if anybody's ever cataloged it. There's probably thousands of different mechanics that have been created since 1974, when Dungeons and Dragons first came out. That from something that's extremely simple and involves regular dice or funny looking dice to things that is like doing advanced algebra, to figure out stuff. And I prefer the lightweight stuff because I'm simple. I like to keep it simple. I don't want to I don't want to bog up the story with a bunch of flipping around through books trying to get clarification on rules. But I think in a sense they give some structure, and they, like I said, they give that element of surprise and challenge, and but they're not necessarily, people get bogged down in them too, and they're more worried about the rules, and they're afraid to play because they're afraid they don't know the rules, and instead of just jumping in and saying, hey, let's play make believe together. And I think that's a good place to start there.
Jeff, how many people have you had throughout the years that you've taught how to do that, to just have make believe?
I don't have any idea. A lot.
How about you, Jeff?
I don't know if I've actually really taught many people. I know at least one person who has only started playing in my current campaign is just starting playing in her first time playing. Uh, but I think everybody else I've played with all have played, they all knew the concept and had played some games before. So I guess I'm not a very good person for bringing people into the hobby, but if
I remember Jeff being very welcoming to just about everybody, which is a key thing for role playing, is
mhm,
welcoming and
yeah,
the different perspectives and
oh
Yeah.
yeah,
everything like that. I remember you being super welcoming, Jeff, so don't worry about that part of it. Well, yeah, I mean, I have had people who I had to like, no, this is a dice. This is what a 20-sided dice looks like. They played
mhm.
for years with me without ever
Yeah.
knowing, because I do all mine online, just typing in chat, so you didn't have to worry about physical things in front of you. So yeah,
Yeah. See that green one? Roll it. Tell me what you
yeah,
got.
yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So tell me about, what's the thing you're most proud of for in your role playing experience? What can you think about
Hmm.
for that? What makes you, what springs to mind when you're just like, I'm proud and happy of this. Maybe not necessarily a character thing, but something that you're happy about that makes you feel good about role playing.
I think just that I've been playing with the same group now since 1996.
Oh, I'm jealous.
That's the same group. Basically, there's a couple people have left and there's a couple people who've joined in, but that's the same rough group of people for that whole time. And I've run games for them for about half of that time, I think. Other people have run other games in it, but we would switch around in that. But yeah, they're all good people. They're all people that I'm friends with. Uh, that's, having the friendships out of that, I think, is the best part of it.
Yeah, I think for me, the things that I'm most proud of, the things that have brought me the most joy is seeing people of all literally ages. I've run games with kids as young as 8, that at the same table there may be someone that's in their 60s, and um, everybody, just that happiness and joy that comes of people coming together, whether it's on a regular basis or maybe with just a one time or a two-time thing. There have been friendships that have been built that are immeasurable, and in the span of a couple hours sitting around a table, you've experienced something together that you never would have. You could have sat and played Uno, and that would have been fun too. But but you've experienced some things that you never would have otherwise, because now your imagination has been working together with their imagination, and together you've built these visuals inside your mind, or uh, and it's powerful. I have absolutely zero regrets of bringing my boys to some of these games, and interacting with the other adults, and how learning that adults are in some sense kids too, but they also learned a lot of maturity in that time too. It wasn't like it was all a bunch of
Yeah,
like
you
junior high
mentioned it
school
earlier.
jokes and
You
stuff.
mentioned it earlier with the teamwork.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah,
way of building teams.
yeah. There's been a lot of education opportunities are just abundant.
Mm.
Lots
I've
of reading,
actually,
lots of math. Go, Jeff.
I've actually seen like jokes of people putting together like stuff to go on your resume that D&D on there because of team building, problem
Absolutely.
solving, group stuff, all of that. And it's true. It's
Yeah,
funny, but it's true.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a
It
lot of
is.
management skills that can be learned from being a dungeon master. A
Mhm.
lot. And you also learn how to do lesson plans.
Yeah, yeah. Planning is an important part of helping to run the game.
Yep.
Um, what is your one tool that you think everybody needs?
Imagination.
Uh, yeah, yeah. If you have the imagination, you can make something that'll work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. You can have
oh, sorry.
nothing but an imagination and a regular old six-sided die, and you can create worlds.
'Cause we always ask this question about, dude, what's your favorite piece of gear? What's the one that's where I want to go to now? So we know you can do this with almost nothing. Just being able to talk, type away, you can role play and you can create. What's your top of the line? What's your most wanted, coolest, best piece of tech or device or whatever it is that will help you be better, make a better role player, help you run a game better, etc.? What would be out there that would push that limit for you?
For me, it's not tech. I mean, other than the fact that I use my iPad to now read some of the books instead of using the hard copies, because I can now do that little pinch thing and make it readable, because I'm going on
Uh-huh.
54, and it's not what it used to be. But I don't. It's To me, it's low tech or no tech for the most part. My biggest thing I'm proud of is my dice that are made out of metal, to clunk 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 when you roll them. But I that's about it really for me.
Yeah, I don't know that there's much. I mean, the two pieces of tech I use regularly is the virtual tabletop software I'm using and D&D Beyond for the character sheets and the rules and all of that stuff. I've invested in that, so I have the digital copies. The players have the characters in there. They have access to the full set of rules. That just because, since COVID, we stopped playing locally and have gone to all online. and actually brought a player in who had moved away back into the game.
Right.
So we're going to stay remote. And I think actually with that, that helps some of the immersion with the maps and the digital stuff you can do with some of that stuff, which I think is pretty cool. You
It's very
don't
cool.
necessarily, you don't need it, but because you can just sit around and just describe stuff to people and they can play. But for some of it, having that on the screen that they can look at and see, oh, I can't see around the corner. I can only see this far before it blacks out, and I don't know what's beyond that, and is good for the immersion in there.
I've done virtual tabletop on my game for since 2003 is when we started doing that just here for that.
Yeah, I've played it, but I've been intimidated to run games that way.
I actually only use because I think on the VTTs you can go and put all the characters data in and have to re-enter it. I didn't want to do that. I actually just use it for the screen and move the characters around. We don't do any of the rolls in there. They actually can just roll their dice or roll it on D&D Beyond or whatever and do that.
Yeah.
But there's actually even simpler virtual tabletops. You don't even have to make an account. You can just go there and draw stuff on it and then open it up and point it to other people. There's a number of them that are like very simple, like almost just like the wet erase marker pads that you can use to draw stuff
Right here,
on.
yeah. I can just open up a whiteboard right here and we can start playing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I got my dice right behind me here.
Yeah, yeah. That's what this is all about. So, and that leads me to that whole idea of your ultimate equipment, and we've talked about it on other shows about virtual reality and augmented reality and all those sorts of things. Do you think that adding that technology, or talk about what you guys both see as the benefits and the negatives of having that technology melded to your imagination, kind of thing? You started it on it, Jeff. I think you have something else to say there.
I think with the VR and stuff that like, end game holodeck kind of stuff
Mhm.
is I think good and bad because I think part of it is the imagination of being able to do stuff that you can't do. Being more charismatic, being smarter, being more physically tough or stronger, you can do when you're at the you're abstracted a little away. If it's actually you moving around and doing it, if you can't actually do that, that part of the simulation will just fail because you can't do it. So I think, and I think that's getting closer to then becoming like the pre-scripted video game stuff as opposed to the more free form that you can get with the. I think that there's a point where it flips from being helpful to hindrance, but I'm not sure exactly where that is.
Yeah, I think that the technology and stuff there's some amazingly cool things that you can do with it, and the way that it can just the way that it can illustrate where your story is going and visualize a lot of that stuff so that you can communicate with visually and not just audibly. um uh I've run some games during the pandemic, and the beauty of that was we used just something like simple as like Google Meet or Zoom, and it was just basically like we are now, just a couple heads on a screen, and we talked, and maybe I'd put a picture up on the screen where they could see a visual. But for the most part, we rolled our dice on our table, and we trusted each other to, 'cause go ahead and lie if you want to, but we're still going to have fun regardless. Um, uh, but uh, now that we started meeting again locally, a number of people. I do love there being a tech-free aspect to that, where we can sit around the table and not be looking at our devices and our phones and our, I ask people to turn their ringers off and things like that, and not to be distracted by Facebook and all that kind of stuff. It's difficult. It's hard for a lot of people to be disconnected, but I think when they really start getting involved in it, they can see, wow, that was really cool, and I didn't look at my phone once.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
And yeah, I'm the exact opposite, where I don't have anyone in my current game that's even in the same state right now.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
they're
that's just
scattered across.
remarkable. But
Yeah.
I have friends all over the cotton picking world that I've played games with that that I love like near brothers, and I've never actually physically met many of them. And it's just amazing, the stories we share.
And along those lines there, tell me, where do you two think someone could have helped you get started with this? Along the lines of, because you've both had a lot of different people that you've played with in that. Looking back on how you got started, what would you have wanted now that you know more? What could somebody have done to help you out back then?
Hmm.
And like for myself, as I mentioned, I mean, it was my mother just kind of like, well, I know he likes reading science fiction books, so I think he might want this. I don't know. So
Yeah.
she just took the chance on it and said, here, you're homesick for 3 days. Here, try this.
I guess I have to say for me that back when it wasn't too long after I got started that the so-called satanic panic started,
Oh,
and suddenly Dungeons and Dragons became the kind of thing that suddenly you felt like you had to be afraid of. And other role-playing games, people just lumped all that stuff into big giant categories that they didn't really understand. The media overhyped. Suddenly there were things being blamed for Dungeons, just like the Stranger Things.
yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of what they're playing off of. Um, and now I look at it as an adult, and I think, wow, it's amazing that things went that far, but it did. And I wished instead it would have been nice to have been encouraged in all the ways. I don't even think we understood then how much tabletop role playing was going to uh, have so many different types of teachable moments in it, where we could learn the type of skills that we were learning. And I would have loved to have been able to had that fostered as a young kid playing those games, instead of feeling like you had to like you were ashamed that you were some sort of um, outcast. And now look at us. Now all of a sudden we're the cool kids on the block.
Yeah, there you go. How about you, Jeff? Thinking back to
Uh,
the dark past.
mm, I think it's really just finding people who are like, hey, I'm playing. You want to play? Or, hey, we don't know how to do this, but let's all get together and give it a try. And with, there's so much of the stuff out there now, you can get started with like free stuff. I mean, D&D, you can download a free PDF of it and start playing, and that's enough to get you started to know if you'll like it.
Hmm.
And even though people always complain, oh, these books are so expensive, they're for how much time you spend with them playing, they're really cheap. If you put time
Yeah,
in, they pay for themselves quickly.
it's
And
less than a movie.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think with stuff like if you're trying to figure out what do I want to play or what is this and how to do that with like the streaming and just being able to watch somebody play, I think really makes that a lot easier to get people understanding what it is. Then I think a lot of times in the past it was a lot harder to describe. You can describe it, but if you don't see it, it's hard to really describe it well to what it actually is. But now you can point it like it's Critical Role. No one's going to be as pretty, but they're going to be, it's going to be those something like that or other games out there that are streamed and stuff. So,
You guys have hit all my questions. It's awesome. Thank you. It's because I'm looking at my list of things here. It's like, oh wait, no, they already said that. Oh no, they already talked about that one. Um, about that, where you're going with that idea of it being inviting in. I know, I I am very happy with the idea that I've had a chance to introduce this to people who don't like role playing. They've
Yes.
come in, they've tried it, and they've gone, no, I just don't like this. And I'm like, great, you tried it. That's what it's all about. is, don't be afraid to try new things and explore. And, maybe you don't like Bob, maybe you don't like how I do a thing, but Sean might run a game that you'd be interested in. And Jeff does something totally different with his platform or whatever, and that kind of stuff. So I think that's one of the things that people miss about role playing from the outside, that it's not one monolithic piece. Even though we've said D&D
Yeah.
a million times here, if you're really into James Bond, there's this really cool James Bond role-playing game that you can,
There's some really cool stuff like that.
yeah, there's out there. Dream Park, if the
Oh,
old
yeah,
novel
I've
from
heard
the
of that. Yeah.
90s, where it takes the D&D idea out to the AR VR kind of thing, of showing that the kind of, it was like pre-Jurassic Park kind of type movie. Um, what is the associated creativity that you feel you should have or could have to bring into role playing? Because this is one of those hobbies that you pick up. Sean was casually mentioning about learning and doing these things, and I was like, yeah, and then you have to go learn math, and you have to go learn some reading, and you have to go do this. What are the things that you think are good to bring in as an outside thing?
I think again, it's just that imagination and storytelling.
Mhm.
There's, and that's really where it starts and it almost stops to a point, because the mechanics and the structure of the games, you can go either way with them. The pendulum can swing to something extremely simplistic. You could play a role playing game and you could flip a quarter at every decision, and it's a 50% chance of whether you'd succeed or not succeed. Um, or you could have some of these some of these games that have multi volume rule sets, one volume just being on combat and the other volume being on creating a character, and people love that, and that's great. you know you can't say you've tried role playing game if you've tried one. It's like I went to a restaurant once and it sucked. I'm never going to a restaurant again. um there's just way too wide of a offering out there.
Yeah. Although
I
the
don't even
thing
remember what
is,
the question was.
uh,
Tell us, Jeff, what do you think?
although well, yeah, there's more than one role-playing game, but one of them is way, way bigger and much more popular than all the other ones. So probably learn D&D and then try some of the other ones, because you'll always find people who know D&D. That's, that's going to probably be the easiest thing to get to. It's the easiest to describe to people who aren't in the hobby. What do you play? I play D&D. Even if you're not even playing D&D, you say I play
Yeah,
D&D.
yeah, it's
Uh,
almost like it's become the generic term for role
yeah,
playing games in many settings. Yeah.
How about
yeah.
what other skills have you guys developed outside of it? And I'm thinking not what we already talked about with, like, problem solving and that, but what's that possibly odd skill that you learned, or odd bit of knowledge that you had to go track down because you were so into the role playing and had to go learn something, or to go to learn that or whatever? What is it, the side hobby that you've now picked up on because of role playing?
I've done some 3D modeling of stuff, uh, playing with software called Blender. It's a free 3D software, to make part of a map for something, because I wanted to make it look good in 3D with shadows and stuff. And I've played with that for it. Uh, I actually did some research into physics, uh, for there was big columns that were that were a gate to another dimension, and the party, they were going to try to pull one over. And from how I described it, could they actually pull it over? And I had to figure out, how could they actually do that? Turns out they could, if they had a lot more horses and a lot more rope than they actually did, but they would have been able to, with enough stuff. But yeah, that's
How about you, Sean?
Uh,
Did you get into metalworking? Did you start building your own swords?
no, no, no. I think. Well, I've learned some bookbinding. I guess I've learned a little bit about that. Um, there's a lot of role-playing game accessories and stuff that you can buy in PDF format that are easily printed into booklet form. And so I did a lot of that for a while because it was really enjoyable and kind of cathartic. And um, my oldest son, he really enjoyed the painting aspects where he would paint the different miniatures and things like that. In fact, he continues to doing that to this day. I don't know how we had over
You could do a whole
thousands.
show
We had
just on
thousands of
painting. Yeah.
miniatures. Yeah, and um, he now has like the entire fleets of ships. Like he has the entire Japanese fleet, and he's working on building the American fleet for all the different ships, and very small ones, of course.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Can only have so much room. But that's that's something that he picked up because of the hobby, and he enjoys it. So I'd love to get into doing some 3D modeling, and at some creating my own miniatures or plastic things or whatever. But life is
That's what I
busy.
learned a bunch of my computer programming just from trying to figure out how to build something for my game, whether it was web design, whether it's XML, whether it was I need to learn how to recode in the
Yeah.
VTT platform that I'm using. The owner left it as ghostware 10 years ago and I'm still using it. So I better figure out how I'm going to actually make this work. Yeah.
Now that you mention that, back in the '80s, we were trying to recreate a lot of our role playing games and using writing in BASIC, on our TRS 80s, or Texas Instrument computers, trying to figure out how we could
Yeah.
make our games better with using basic programming. So yeah, I had forgotten about that. So
Yeah, computers are just all part of our lives evermore. It just feels like that. One final question for you guys is where do you think this kind of hobby is going towards the future? Because I don't think anybody in the 80s or even early 90s thought it was going to be at this level of just societal acceptance and part of, I mean, like you said, I mean, Critical Role people are out there making little mini TV series now at this kind of thing. Where do you guys think the next sort of ideas for that will be? What could you picture it would be? Because I know my one thought is I just need the universal translator because I've got friends I'd love to be able to play with, but
yeah,
I can't explain it and I do not speak Spanish. I'm sorry.
right. Yeah, I think virtual reality is probably uh, is up and coming and an existing technology that's going to involve a lot more. I think in the role playing aspect. Um, I don't see it going away anytime soon. I think with virtual tabletops and things that are coming into play now, and I honestly think that board games and literal physical tabletop board games, role playing games, I think they're making a very happy comeback too, and to me that's a very exciting thing. It's good because I love seeing people come together to have fun. Um, so yeah, it's I can't wait to see what's coming up in the future years.
What are you going to be building, Jeff? What's your son going to be using?
Mm, Uh, my guess would probably be like combination of the physical, here I'm playing with friends, or here's an online, with the VR and go, but have your tabletop and do stuff with that. I can certainly see that as a uh, something that would be feasible and would be fun and people would do.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting. I don't see us stopping. I've
No,
been we've all been running our games for however many decades. So yeah, there's no reason. My wife has said, well, how, I'm like, this, I was doing this before I met you. I'll be doing this long after.
Yeah, yeah,
This is just what we do. This is part
yeah.
of who we are.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about taking it into assisted living homes
Yeah.
and finding people there that are looking for things to do and start to run games and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Using it for, we've used it here in the library a couple of times for doing different types of programs and setting up the teens, just to get them started and then let them run off on their own. That was one of the fun things of 20 years ago when I was doing this. They were like, well, how do we get these kids? They're all just playing games on a computer. And I'm like, I've got this idea. Maybe we could like take that EverQuest thing that they're all playing, and if we just took some paper and pencils and maybe some dice to do these things, and maybe we could convince the kids to get off the computer and we could go play this stuff. And the librarians were all like, "Oh my God, that's a brilliant idea. How'd you come up with that?" And I'm like, "Don't worry about it." Thank you both very much for being here with us. Let me throw up our final slide here. It's been a really fun little talk here. I hope
Oh,
we
yeah.
geeked out just the right amount for everybody without freaking anybody out about this. If you need to get in touch with anybody from the show, creationstation@broward.org comes right to me. And we'll see you next month to talk about this again. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.